Hi there, my name is John Stevens, pastor of Zion Lutheran Church in Oregon City, Oregon, and we're part of the ELCA, and welcome to Dollar Store Children's Sermons, where we take a look at the lectionary text, time to an item from the Dollar Tree. This is for the narrative lectionary, and we're starting year 2, and the preaching text is out of Genesis, and it's a story of creation, God creating Adam, and then God creating the helpmate, and God creating the creatures and Adam getting to name them. And it's that when I think about it, I think it's like, oh, it's that old story of creation. And I got thinking about this, about ways that we might do a children's sermon around it. And I love the stories we tell about the way things used to be, and the good old days. A couple of the phrases I was thinking of is like, and some of this I say tongue in cheek. When I was a kid, we used to do this, or kids these days, or let's see, I have a couple of I want to pull these up because I was thinking about what ones that other ways that we say it, and I like it. Oh yeah, so in the good old days when I was a kid, remember when they used to, kids these days, all these things. So it's like, and they're great stories. They're not all, they're usually a lament, because things have changed. You remember when they used to be this way. And it really could be a lament. It could be, you remember one of the things, we had this little bank that has a cross on the top, and you put a penny in, and it drops down, and people tell stories about when they were a kid, and in Sunday school, the pennies would be collected for the birthdays. And maybe you still do that. I remember when I was a kid, we would do that, have a small little cabin, a church cabin made out of wood, and we would put pennies in there as our offerings when it came to our birthday so that we could highlight how many years we were. And they go, remember when? We have the stories in our church about, remember when we had to build the Sunday school edition because so many kids, and now we've got 4 kids. We've got 4 wonderful, beautiful kids in Sunday school, and they are a gift, and God is using us at this time for them, and it's great. However, we cannot help but think, remember the good old days. So I look at the story of creation, and I look at this picture of how things were, and we also know about how things are now. And it reminds me of God's grace and the beauty of God's forgiveness, and that we had this created place where we were created and we are co-creators and we are called to be in mission, and we mess up and we stumble. And the picture that we have of today is not like the picture that we see as poured out in creation. What that tells me when I look at that story is it tells me that we were called to be in community with one another. We were called to be together, and we were called to be as family, as a human family, called together. And we stumble and we fall. And so we tell stories about how things were and a longing for God to come and restore creation again and restore community. And God does that slowly and with us as we are called together in community. So, all of this to say, the item I'm going to use is a bottle of baby shampoo. Because, for me, when I think of stories, and I think of the stories about my kids when they were young, or I think about holding a baby in baptism, there is nothing that smells better than a baby's head. I tell you, I love the smell of a baby's head. There's just something about that. And it's one of those things is it takes me back. It's the story of creation. It's the story. There's just something that is special there. And so that's what I'm using because it draws me back. Maybe you have something else that you have. Maybe it's a baby blanket, or maybe it's something that your grandmother gave you. Maybe it's an apple pie because when your grandfather would make apple pies and one of these things that just help draw us back to the story about the way things used to be, or maybe the way that you hope or can't wait for them to be again. When we talk about the gathered around the banquet table in heaven, there's stories about what we might smell and the smelling of the food and the meal. And maybe when we gather around the table and you receive bread and wine, body and blood, grape juice and gluten-free crackers, I mean, that reminds us that God is restoring us in this place. And so we look back at the story, that old story of creation, and we look at what God is doing with us now. Lots of stuff here, lots of springboards going on, but I'm looking at what we remember, and that God is continually calling us together as community, continually restoring us as community. When we stumble and we fall, God comes to us first and picks us up. We can remember the stories, the days of old, and then we can remember what God is doing in our midst today. So I hope this can be a springboard for your own thinking. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and I hope you have a fantastic week.